Hello everyone, my name is Asil, Elisa, and Darren.
Hello.
And we're students here at Cal Poly Pomona. We are going to give you a presentation of an analysis of the Institute of Managerial Accounts, or IMA's Statement of Ethical Professional Practice. Here's an outline of what we will be discussing for this presentation. First, we will give you a brief summary of the IMA's Statement of Ethical Professional Practice. Then we will give you an analysis of the school of ethical thought that we believe is a framework for this code of conduct, as well as discuss the code's strengths, weaknesses, and give any suggestions for improvements. So, like I said, I'm going to give you a brief summary of the IMA's Statement of Ethical Professional Practice, which is divided into three major sections. The first section is the principles. The IMA Code of Ethics incorporates honesty, fairness, objectivity, responsibility, part of their ethical principles. And I will define these terms according to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary. The first principle we have here is honesty. And honesty is the quality of being fair and truthful. The second principle we have is fairness. Fairness is agreeing with what is thought to be right or acceptable. The third principle we have is objectivity. And objectivity is based on facts rather than feelings or opinions. And the last principle we have here is responsibility. And responsibility is a state of being the person who caused something to happen, a duty or a task that you're expected to do. Second, we have Darren for the second section.
I'm going to be discussing the standards. The first standard is competence. It is important for an IMA professional to have continuing education so that they're able to stay at the forefront of their industry. Secondly, it's important for a professional to complete their responsibilities in accordance with applicable laws, regulations, and technical standards. It's also important that they provide judgment information and recommendations that are correct, clear, concise, and timely. And it's also important for the professional to avoid conflicts of interest. The second standard that I'm going to discuss is confidentiality. It's vital that the IMA professional keep confidential information confidential, except when its disclosure is approved by the client or by when it's legally mandated by a governing body. It's also important for the professional to monitor their assistance activities to safeguard their pertinent information. Also, it's important that the professional must not use confidential information to advance their own self-interest. Thirdly, integrity. It's important for the professional to avoid conflicts of interest. They also must abstain from engaging in any conduct that would potentially cause a bias in executing their duties. And lastly, under integrity, the professional must refrain from any activity that may dishonor the profession. The fourth standard is credibility. It's important that the IMA professional communicate information honestly and accurately. It is also their duty to disclose all pertinent information that could influence the user's understanding of the information provided by the IMA professional. Lastly, under credibility, they must divulge any delays or insufficiencies in information, timeliness, processing, or internal controls that conform to the organization's policy and or relevant laws. And that's I'm going to hand it over to Elisa.
The last section in the IMA's Statement of Ethical Professional Practice is dedicated to helping professionals with the resolution of conflict. It describes a three-step process that a person can use to resolve an ethical issue when the policies and procedures at the person's own organization are insufficient. The first of the 3 steps is to discuss the situation with their immediate supervisor, unless of course the supervisor may be involved in the conflict. In that case, you will want to go to the next level of management to discuss the issue and possibly get advice on how to handle it. The second step is to clarify relevant ethical issues. And you can do this by having a confidential discussion with an IMA ethics counselor or other impartial party to get a better understanding of the ethical issue, which is basically just to frame what's actually going on and if something's actually going on. They can also give you some advice and other possible solutions. The third of the 3 steps is to consult your own attorney. And this is to get an understanding of any legal obligations or rights that pertain to the issue. And now I'll pass it on to Asil.
Okay, I will be discussing the School of Ethical Thought, deontology. So deontology is a school of ethical thought that we decided best describes the fundamental nature of the IMA's Code of Ethics. The ethical school of thought describes duties, responsibilities, and rules for its members. And the basic principle for deontology is to uphold moral duties and obligations, which is found in the fundamentals of the Code of Ethics. It also gives, it is important for outcomes, that outcomes are more important than inputs. And deontology also describes the prima facie duties, which are do good and promote happiness, do no harm and prevent them, keep your promises, make up for past harm to others, be grateful for past favors and unearned services, improve yourself, and give each person equal consideration. And then next we have Darren.
Next, we will discuss how deontology directly relates to the IMA's Code of Conduct. Firstly, the IMA's Code of Conduct says that if you follow these principles and standards, you will be an ethical person. Under the School of Deontology, if you follow the prima facie duties, you will be considered an ethical person. This means that the principles and standards of the IMA Code is almost equivalent to the prima facie duties of deontology. Second, the IMA's Code requires professionals to help others adhere to the principles and standards, which directly relates to equal consideration under the School of Deontology. I will now pass it to Elisa.
Deontology is often referred to as the Rights and Duties School of Thought, and 3 of the 4 standards specifically mention following relevant laws and regulations, which is in line with deontology. Integrity, which is the 3rd standard, does not specifically mention laws and regulations, but does say to refrain from behavior that would prevent you from carrying out duties ethically. This also is in line with deontology since it is emphasizing the commitment to following duties. Next, we will discuss how the standards in the code directly relate to the prima facie duties of deontology. The first standard of competence requires professionals to participate in continuing education, which directly relates to the prima facie duty of improving yourself. Competence also includes providing decision support that is clear, correct, concise, and timely, as well as communicating what professional limitations could prevent you from properly doing your job. These relate directly to doing good and promoting happiness, and on the flip side, to doing no harm and preventing harm. If a professional is not communicating effectively and providing services that they are not knowledgeable about, they could impair the decision maker's ability to make good decisions, since the information provided has been distorted. The second of the 4 standards of confidentiality requires professionals to keep information private unless the client consents to release or if it is legally mandated. The prima facie duty that directly relates to this standard is do no harm and prevent harm, as well as keeping promises. The release of confidential information could harm the client, and it is often a contract between the professional and the client to keep all information between them private. Confidentiality also directly relates to equal consideration because it requires professionals to communicate with all parties regarding the confidential information, as well as making sure that subordinates are also following this requirement. And I will pass it to Darren, who will discuss the last 2 standards.
The third standard, integrity, requires the IMA professional to act with integrity, which enables the professional to avoid and/or mitigate conflicts of interest. The prima facie duties that relate to integrity are do no harm and equal consideration. By resolving conflicts of interest, it will enable the professional to avoid harming the client by eliminating the appearance of and actual conflicts of interest before they become a major concern to the organization. Also, by acting with integrity, you can offer equal consideration to all clients that you encounter. Every job that a professional performs should be completed to the best of their ability and allows the professional to stand behind the work that they put forth. If a professional is not acting with integrity, it could lead to harming the client. And also, if the professional is not giving equal consideration, attention, or consideration to the client, the professional is not living up to the IMA Code of Ethics. So the 4th standard that we're going to discuss is credibility. It's another important point in the code that encourages professionals to act reliably and communicate accurate information to their clients. The prima facie duties that relate to this ethical standard are do no harm and equal consideration. When acting with credibility, it encourages the professional to act with honesty and deliver accurate information to their clients, allowing the client not to be harmed by inaccurate information and its potential legal ramifications. Also, by acting credibly and providing equal attention to the clients, it allows the professional to stand behind their work and give the professional assurance that they have performed in the best interest of their client. Next, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Asil to discuss the strengths of the IMA code. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about 3 strengths that we found in the Code of Ethics. The first one is the congruence between the principles and the standards. It was very interesting to us to see how they incorporated the principles of honesty, fairness, objectivity, and responsibility to the standards of this code. So when applying the standards to professional behavior, you're not only applying the standards, but you're also applying the principles. So basically using principles with each of those standards. The second strength we found was the ethical code included a resolution of conflict section at the end to help members with ethical dilemmas. This shows an alternative way to deal with ethical conflicts. So if members within an organization fall into an ethical conflict and the policies and procedures of their company did not work to resolve the conflict, the IMA Code of Ethics provides them with an alternative method. For example, a controller that works for a manufacturing company follows the company's procedures with regards to ethical conflicts, and the issue is not resolved, they're able to use the alternative method provided by the IMA. And the third strength we have here, we found, was the emphasis encouraging others to behave ethically for a healthier organizational culture. Under the principal section, the code stated to act ethically and also encourage others within the organization to behave ethically as well. And then now we're going to have Darren talk about weaknesses.
When going over the code, we did encounter a few weaknesses. A couple weaknesses. The first weakness that we encountered was that the IMA code is very broad, and that the professionals could benefit from some specific examples to help them comprehend the essence of the code. For example, with confidential information, if an IMA professional were to know about a new product being put out in the marketplace, and this information is divulged to a third-party member for financial gain, this is basically them acting unethically. So they need to keep that information confidential. The second weakness that we found in the code was the lack of regulatory bodies that are going to enforce the code, and what the potential punishments would be if the code is broken by the IMA professional themselves. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Elisa for our suggestions.
The final part of our presentation is the suggestion. And one suggestion that we would add to the code is to include another standard called transparency. Throughout the code, there is an undertone of transparency, but we believe that by making it a standard, professionals would be more aware of it. For example, in the standard of credibility, it says to disclose delays or deficiencies in information, timeliness, processing, and internal controls. This does relate to credibility, but also relates to the transparency of the professional. Also, in the standard of competence, it requires professionals to communicate any limitations they may have while performing their job. If these requirements were under the standard of transparency, all professionals reading the code would not just get an undertone of transparency, but it would be an obvious requirement. Well, that is the end of our presentation, and we just want to thank you for watching, and we hope that you learned a little bit more about the Institute of Managerial Accountants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.